Hi folks, welcome to the Prepared Homestead. This is Travis, out enjoying a beautiful late summer, almost fall day here in the Ozarks. It's been hot and dry, and then we had about a week worth of just rainy, drizzly, wet, moist, humid. And then today, man, it is beautiful. Barely 80 degrees, sunny skies. It's just a nice little breeze. It's nice. This is what I love about the Ozarks, is we get these little hints of fall or hints of spring or hints of summer, and then all of a sudden it finally gets here. So anyways, today I want to talk about food again. I know you probably get tired of me talking about it, but it's really important. I don't know if I could stress enough the importance it is for us to become food independent. It's possible to do. I know a lot of people say it's impossible. I believe it is possible to be very self-sufficient when it comes to your food. You're going to have to alter your diet, most likely. You're going to maybe have to eat certain things or eat in certain ways that you may not be accustomed to and you may not like at first. And you're going to have to do a lot of work. It's work to be food self-sufficient. We're not there yet. We're getting close, working really hard. We're hoping next year we can be the vast majority of our food would be completely produced here on the property in some way. And, probably at least enough that we could consider ourselves capable of surviving here. But it is important because that is one of those ways that they can really control us. And this isn't really just some conspiracy. It's a fact. It's been done over and over again. The communism has been quite famous for that, but not even just communism. But let's use them for an example. When they were coming through and taking over parts of Europe, that was one of the things that they did, is they caused man-made food shortages. They caused, through manipulation of the system, taking over farms, causing crops to, by force or by some accident, causing crops to not be able to be produced or be able to be harvested. They are excellent at that. That's what communism does, and that's what global governance does. They want to manipulate and control that, because they know if they control the food, they can really control the people, because it's one of the few things that we absolutely have to have. It's a must, You can only go so long without eating. Even Henry Kissinger, such a great person, right? He said, he who controls the food supply controls the people. And it's very true. So above many, many things that I find importance, food supply, our food supply here on this homestead, is one of the most important things that we focus on because of how serious it is. And right now, the world we live in, I believe it is more serious than ever. If you are able to go out and stock up on any kind of foods, do it. If you don't have a lot of money, there are some things that you can buy a lot of that doesn't cost a lot. Bags of rice, bags of beans, bags of corn, things like that. Once you get that kind of going, then you can start expanding into things that cost a little bit more. Learn to grow your own food, raise your own food, harvest your own food, forage for your own food, hunt for your own food, that kind of stuff. There's some things going on right now that some of you may not be aware of. Another YouTube channel, a big one, and I absolutely love watching this guy's stuff. He's by far, in my opinion, the most detailed information when it comes to, and it's predominantly food, but he talks about other things, and that's Ice Age Farmer. So the things, not everything, but a lot of things I'm going to be saying today, he covered in another video in much more detail and covered several other things. So if you would like to hear the details, you can certainly go over to Ice Age Farmer and listen to his one of his more recent videos. Mine will include some commentary. So let's get it started. You folks are probably all aware of what is called Event 201. And it was a simulation that was run last year by Johns Hopkins University and the Bill Gates Foundation and some government groups and stuff on how would the world respond and how would the United States respond to a global pandemic, right? And it just so happened that the global pandemic was this coronavirus that they created, or that the simulation was on a coronavirus. And it was very kind of strange that they did this simulation. It was funny because within a few months, guess what? We had a novel coronavirus pandemic. Many of you are probably aware, and I covered this the other day on a Patreon video. If you guys want to get extra content, you can shoot over to Patreon. There's a link in the description below. I put extra videos, and I've been putting a lot more content out there on Patreon. It doesn't cost much, $1 to get in the door, and you can hear some of that. But one of the things I said in the video there is that the government is really good at that. If you go back, maybe you're not this deep into conspiracies, but the fact is on 9/11, while the towers were being struck by airplanes, there was actually a simulation training game going on by the military of the Twin Towers being attacked by terrorists. On the day of the Sandy Hook school shooting, there just happened to be, at that same time, the police officers on the other side of town at a vacant school building doing drill practice games on school shootings. This happens quite often. So, I said all that to say this. Are you aware of that there has been a kind of simulation game played on the collapse of our food system? A man by the name of John Podesta, and I'm sure many of you know who that is. John Podesta has become quite famous lately for his sex scandals and email scandals, maybe even satanic cult scandal, however you want to say that. But he was also the head and founder of an organization called the Center for American Progress. Yeah, it's a very left-wing liberal organization that's funded by George Soros, another name you all probably know quite well. These guys are deep embedded into that globalist, just real dirtiness, okay? In my opinion, anyways. So 5 years ago, his organization, the Center for American Progress, along with a few other very left-wing type organizations, the feel-good organizations, they ran a simulation hosted a simulation called the Food Chain Reaction Game. And it was a simulation of the global food supply completely collapsing. This simulation took place in 2015, and guess what? In the simulation, they simulated that the global food supply would collapse in 2020. Yeah, that's right. And they said in the simulation 5 years ago that it would basically happen because of a global pandemic. It's weirdly coincidental, right? They talked about in the simulation of how because of overpopulation, because of political climates, because of climate control, all this kind of stuff, all building, and then this pandemic happens and it caused the global food supply chain to collapse. It's real strange, isn't it? Now that we know that, let's take a step back and look at what's happened over the past several months with this pandemic and the food supply. Of course, you're all aware of shortages. We don't really need to go into detail in that, because we all know about it, right? It seems that, especially early on, and it's still happening, it's not being covered a lot in the news because, that's boring now. We already know about that. Now it's, riots and civil rights and this election and president and Biden and blah, blah, blah. So they're not really talking about it, but it's still going on, that this pandemic has hit the food supply system probably the worst. And what I mean by that is farm workers, farms themselves, anything in the food production industry has probably been affected more than anything. And it seems so strange that you hear of other businesses that, they may have a few positive cases, and then you hear about a Tyson plant that, half of the people there test positive. It's really strange that so many of them, Tyson has mandatory testing now for their employees. There are farm workers, lots of the big corporate farms, which the vast majority of food produced here in America is produced by these big corporate farms. Little farms like what we have, and even others that are bigger, 50 acres, 100 acres, 200 acres. Those are very insignificant in a lot of ways when it comes to the vast majority of food that's produced in the United States. And we're talking like big corporate farms. It's ones that's owned by big companies or owned by China. They're the ones producing the bulk of the food. And they're the ones that really seems to be taking a hit, strangely enough, with this coronavirus. Early on, we heard reports of it, and I've found out that it's still going on. The news media just isn't covering it, about the farms that are, they're either not planting the food, the food is rotting on the vine, they're not harvesting it, or they're harvesting it and they're not able to produce it or to do whatever they need to do to get it to sell. Originally, we were told that this was happening because of the initial shutdown, and there was all these schools that were shut down, and parks and theme parks and stadiums and restaurants that were shut down, so there was all this food bottlenecked up and it had nowhere to go. Remember that? Well, most schools recently have opened up. Most restaurants in the country have opened. Even stadiums and things have opened, and theme parks in most of the country. And yet, you know what we're found out? There's still a lot of these farms that are dumping their food. They're not harvesting their food, or they're just letting it pile up, the harvested food pile up. It's happening still to this day. And it's still being blamed on the coronavirus for some strange reason, that they don't have the farm workers to do it because everyone on the farm, all the workers are sick, so they can't harvest it. It's really strange how it's hitting those. We're talking at a farm. Most of these farm workers work outside, right? I mean, if this virus really isn't that, deadly and that contagious in other areas of industry, like schools, kids go back to school, but yet when you're out in the open air in a farm, out in a field, and you're probably not shoulder to shoulder with the next guy, and yet everyone's getting the coronavirus, it's really strange. And I understand there are some arguments. Some of these are immigrant workers, some of them are illegal immigrant. They may live, confined or very congested homes, lots of family members in one building. There's all those kind of arguments, but I don't think that's going to cover everything. My point being is, it seems very strange that our food supply system has taken such a hit for just some simple, virus. And so I guess the point that I'm trying to get to is that it does seem that this simulation game that was played 5 years ago seems to be playing out quite correctly now. And whether you think it's just by chance, by accident, or that there's some controlling person or persons that are kind of moving the pieces of the chessboard, which is what I tend to believe. I think that's what we're seeing with what's playing out in our food supply system. It's just too much of a coincidence that it's taking a hit, and it's not just that, but they're working to really take over. I think that's the big thing, is they're showing the weakness and the fragility of our food supply system. And so guess what? Government and these organizations are going to have to step in. And if you get online and Christian, which is the guy at Ice Age Farmer, that's his name, he covers it in detail of all these humanitarian organizations and very left-leaning organizations that are all jumping in onto this bandwagon, whether tech companies or tech organizations or whatever it is, social organizations, to try to, protect the food supply system or create this contact tracing type programs and all this kind of stuff. to monitor the COVID-19 pandemic when in regards to the food supply system. So there's this big focus there, and it's not being talked about in the news at all, none. And so because of that, because it's happening, because it fits really well with this simulation game that happened 5 years ago by some very nefarious type people, and it's not being covered in the news, I think it's something that we should all be quite concerned with, because you might be worried that they take your guns away. You might be worried that they do all the things that's tearing down the statues and indoctrinate your kids and all this kind of stuff. But when they control the food that you eat, that's a game changer. When they have absolute control over what you eat, and then like I said, I believe it was in yesterday's video, they could actually control, and this isn't a conspiracy right here. This has been talked about several times by people like Bill Gates, folks like that, that it could potentially get to the point with this vaccine that you couldn't even do business without proving that you've received a vaccine. You couldn't even, go into a grocery store to purchase, because you could contaminate everyone. So you have to prove that it's safe for you to go out in public, and you have to prove that you have this vaccine. Do you see where this is going, folks? It's not just one thing happening over here and another thing happening over here, and it just seems so random that all this stuff's happening. It's not random, folks. This is an orchestrated event that's happening. This is quite orchestrated. I assure you, I believe in the bottom of my heart, this has been planned for years, and it's quite orchestrated, and they are playing it out, and the end results don't look too good. I believe that's also why over the last couple of months, and I've seen several articles in just in the last few weeks, of all this 3D printed food. Yeah, this lab-grown, 3D printed food, that they can make it look like a steak. I don't think it looks like a steak. To me, it looks like a glob of Play-Doh that some kid tried to make look like a steak. I don't know if you've seen it. They swear up and down it's just as good, it's just as healthy. So what if it's a genetically modified organism? Once we give you that vaccine, you're going to be a genetically modified organism. So what's it matter? Here's another one. If all that I've said right so far doesn't have you a little worried, there's a new Senate bill. It's called SB 4453. It is called the Food Supply Protection Act. And whenever a Senate or a congressional bill, whatever the title of it is, you usually can guarantee that it means just the opposite. That's true. Like the Patriot Act. Nothing patriotic about that one. Here's the interesting. Of course, all the big, socialist, communist players in Congress are signed on to this bill. It's been read twice now in the Senate, on the floor. And if you look it up on the website, the contents, the text of it is not on there. They're keeping it from us. You cannot find the text of this bill. The only thing is in the description. And the description basically says it is to protect the continuity of the food supply system during the COVID-19 pandemic. And then at the end of it, it says, and for other purposes. That's it. That's all you can find on this bill. Yeah. Food Supply Protection Act of 2020. Look it up, because I may be wrong, and I hope that I am. I say that often. But I believe that we are in the middle, at least, of this simulation being played out right before our eyes. That they have planned it for years to take over various parts of our system, of our world, of our government, of our society. And one of the biggest ones that they need to gain control of is the food supply. And so that's why they're doing it. So that's why I encourage you to stock up on the foods as much as you can. And that's important. But what's more important than stocking up is learning to produce your own food, learning to grow it, learning to harvest it wild, learning to raise your own food, learning to hunt your own food, fish your own food, whatever it is. You need to become as food self-sufficient as possible, because I think it's very possible that in my lifetime we're going to see the food supply completely dictated and controlled by the government. It will most likely be collapsed by them and controlled by the world's government. And we could see that food becomes a synthetic thing, or food becomes a thing that's handed out only as long as you have the right paperwork. I know that sounds really far-fetched, but if you do the digging of things that the Bill Gates Foundation has talked about, and his organizations, and George Soros and the United Nations, and all these other organizations, if you start digging into what the things that they put out, the papers that they put out, that is exactly what they say in these papers, what they want to do, because they believe that it would create a safer system so that everyone can be fed, and it can help with overpopulation, all this kind of stuff. It's all right there, folks. And I know maybe I could go into it in other videos, but we certainly don't have time because I have run out of time for this one. Thank you for watching. Go check Ice Age Farmer's video out. He is amazing. I don't know the guy, but I love his work. I'll catch you in the next video.